Shabbat Shalom. Well, if you're like me, you probably don't like double parshas. They're very long to read and we're preparing during the week, and very long to sit through in shul. This week we have only one of the two parshas that are usually joined Vayakhel, but there's still some issues there that have to be addressed. Vayakhel and Pekudei, the last two parshiot in Sefer Shmot, are almost entirely a repetition of the construction of the Mishkan and the kelim, the vessels, the menorah, shulchan, and so on that were there. And it's puzzling why the Torah should have to go to such length to describe this in detail twice. Well, a partial answer for this is available for us, as always, in the Ramban, one of the most incisive and insightful commentators we have on the Torah. Well, again, the answer is, as so often, simple but not so simple. The simple answer is that the reason the Torah had to repeat all of the instructions and the commandments to build the Mishkan is that the original mitzvot, the original command to build the Mishkan that was given in Truma and Tzvi, was nullified when Moses broke the tablets. When, according to the Ramban, when Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai and saw the Jews with the golden calf and broke the tablets, this nullified basically not just the commandment to build the Mishkan, which was given in Truma and Tzvi, which come before Parshat Kitisa, but also nullified the covenant, the Brit, that Moshe had done or had performed ceremoniously with the people for the first set of luchot. And after Moshe's intercession and praying, and some would say sort of a bargaining or trying to get HaKadosh Baruch Hu to forgive and to give the Jews a second chance, he was successful, and he came down with a second set of commandments. And so this is actually a new commandment. They're not building the Mishkan that was described and ordered to be built in Parshat Truma Tzvi, but they're building, though it's the same Mishkan, they're fulfilling basically a new order. The first order had been canceled, and now, after Kadosh Baruch Hu had agreed to forgive the Jewish people, there was a new command. But there's a little bit more to the story than that. See, the second covenant, the second brit that binds the Jewish people to God, that comes along with the second set of tablets, is called Brit Chadashah. And, you can never really go back to exactly the way things were beforehand. The Ramban explains the essential difference, the most important difference between the new covenant that came along with the second tablets, as opposed to the first covenant that came along with the first tablets, not here, but at the end of Parshat, at the beginning of Parshat Bahar, at the end of Sefer Vayikra. It has to do with his ideas, which I've spoken about how the Parashot in the Torah are really ordered so perfectly and fit in a very logical sequence. I wouldn't go into that now, but the main difference is this, that the second covenant, the Brit Chadashah, is a much more severe covenant, in that it carries very, very harsh penalties for the violation. This is why the Ramban talks about it at the end of Parshat Bahar, which comes after Bechukotai, the first Tochecha, which gives in very graphic and detailed fashion the type of horrible punishment the Jews can expect if they don't abide by the covenant. This was not the case with the first covenant, but the second covenant comes with these binding penalties. Now, the Ramban doesn't say all that much more. I can say some things that the Ramban says and give you some ideas of my own. For example, the Ramban does point out that the covenant, the first covenant for the first luchot, which didn't carry these severe penalties, was done by means of sacrifice. Moshe offered sacrificial animals. The blood was put into a vessel. Half was sprinkled on the altar, and half was sprinkled on the Jews who were assembled, as a way of sort of symbolizing this binding, this sort of blood binding or blood bonding between the Jews and their God. The blood of the sacrifice is sprinkled equally on the altar and on the Jewish people. There was no such ceremony done with regard to after the Moshe came down with the second tablets. The covenant was bound when the people were assembled and read the law, especially B'chukotai, we're told about the very severe penalties that accompany the Torah and which will be inflicted on the Jewish people if they don't live up to the covenant. Now, there are a few more ideas that I could throw out there in keeping with how I think the Ramban might have looked at it, though his views and his Kabbalah, for lack of a better term, are really hard to penetrate. First of all, it would seem clear that this means that the second covenant, the new brit, is much more involved the midat hadin, the as opposed to midat harachamim. It's more of God displaying his harsh judgment, not necessarily midat hadin hakasheh, but God being someone who is going to exact a penalty for our transgressions. It's also likely, I think, that this explains the difference in the people who participate in the covenant. The first covenant with the blood, Moshe made only with a select group of elite males, the elite of the time, the religious elite who were in charge of sort of religious affairs of the community. Whereas the second brit, he's told at the beginning of Parashat Vayakil to assemble them all, everyone, men, women, children, everyone, and I think it makes sense, because if the second covenant is characterized by the punishment, the penalties that it carries with violation, and these will fall equally on women and children as well as men, maybe even more, suffer more, then it's clear that they should be present when this covenant is sealed. So these are just a few ideas that I have regarding this, but it's an interesting way of looking at things. The Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik, refers briefly to the Ramban in his commentary on Sefer Shmot, and again, this is the Ramban. The more you study him, the more you see how he read the Torah very, very closely and paid extremely close attention to the details, not just the details of the text and every verse every verse and verse, but the order of the presentation, and so that it's all kaftor v'ferach, it's all perfectly crafted book, which is we would expect from Torah that was given to us in Sinai. Shabbat Shalom.